Today we have Leon Weinstein with us, author and blogger. Welcome, Leon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us for this interview, for this recording. I invite our guests to subscribe to your channel and to ours as well. And I would like you to comment on that terrible, horrifying night that happened in Ukraine. It was probably not the first and not the last, but it's horrifying to watch when people are carried out dead from under the rubble, when people are pulled out and they are in very serious condition. And the question arises, why don't the Russians strike at the decision-making centers? And when they announced that they would strike there, we thought that it might really affect the course of the war. But then they announced again that they wouldn't, and they keep striking at people. What do you think is the reason for this? Thank you.
Well, for people who engage in terrorism, this is the best method. Let's define terrorism. It isn't war. War is soldier against soldier. It's an attempt to pressure civil society to force the leadership to do something, right? Actually, the cheapest way, I'm surprised, so to speak. I didn't mean that it's really a good way, yeah, but rather that it's the easiest. So that's why the states that, generally speaking, wanted to bring terror into people's hearts and make them scream, "Stop fighting or we'll all die," and so on. They, so to speak, have always resorted to this kind of method. To expect that someone over there will actually start following what we've developed in our minds, philosophies, and so on, some kind of, liberal, but liberal in the classical sense of the word, goals. Well, absolutely, so to speak. From my point of view, it's foolish and naive because, when the sides are fighting, they try to achieve their goals by any means. I mean, we're not living in an age when two knights would first ask, "Which lady are you fighting for?" "For this one, I think she's the most beautiful." "Well, I think this one is the most beautiful," and then, so to speak, start a duel. I understand I'm exaggerating a bit, right? But still, what laws are there? Like you can't hit someone with a sword when they're down. What laws? To hell with that. If you want to achieve something, you hit with a sword, a sledgehammer, an axe, you kill his children, or just say you'll kill them, or threaten yourself, and so on. That's why war is war, à la guerre comme à la guerre, there's nothing you can do about it. In war, as the ancient Romans used to say. So it's terrible, yes, but it's normal from the logic of war, of course, and this will continue.
Thank you. But what does Peskov say? He said today that the war could even end today if the USSR leaves the 4 regions. So what do you think? Is it really true that if the Ukrainians withdrew their troops from Donetsk region, which is what we're talking about, then that's it? Russia would have no more reason to fight, neither now nor in a few years? So this is the main condition, the stumbling block that causes this war to continue. And if we do this, that's it, there are no more reasons to fight. Is that true or is it different?
Well, there's a saying, the devil is in the details, right? That's what we're demanding. But as soon as we sit down to sign the documents, it turns out, yes, we demand this, but on top of that, more things start coming up. You completely disarm. You have no right to join any alliances. You have no right to keep weapons. You have no right to allow foreign troops on your territory. But we have the right, and we have the right, we have the right. And so you leave, and then we'll decide later, maybe in 2 years, whether we want to start this war again or not. So, yes, I'm absolutely sure that if Ukraine says, "Guys, we'll give up what you haven't captured yet," so to speak, yes. And just to be clear, I'm not for continuing the war, I'm for stopping it. I'm just trying to determine if what Peskov says is true. So, I can say right away that the moment Peskov opens his mouth, one thing is absolutely clear, he's going to lie. So whether he's lying by 10% or by 114%, you can never predict that. But he always lies. That's basically his job title. He's a liar among liars.
Well, yes, but the point is that when the war started, the Russians said that we made a lot of decisions that didn't suit them. For example, we wanted to join NATO, and then we didn't speak Russian. It's hard for me. I do speak it, but it's very hard for me. But we didn't speak Russian, and we did some other things they didn't like. And that was supposedly the reason the war started. But the real reasons were different. Now, in reality, when people are already exhausted, they say, just leave Donbass and that's it, the war will end. Will those same reasons still exist in 2 or 3 years so that the war could start again?
Yes, of course. Look, I'm not entirely sure that the idea, well, let's not call it Putin, it doesn't matter who it is. The idea from the start was to capture Ukraine, in the sense that we understand the word capture. Just like, for example, Hitler's idea wasn't to kill 6 million Jews. He didn't have that idea. He needed to get rid of these people somehow. What does it mean to get rid of them? They had a lot of things that could be quickly divided and used to make people happy. The German population, at least for a while, that's what he was actually aiming for. So, what's his name? Eloizevich, I think. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. And now Adolf Eloizevich, of course. And now he tried to push them into Europe, but at first they decided to trade. Like, we have Jews, let's sell them. Oh, great idea. Not only will we take all their property, we'll also sell the Jews. Nobody wanted to buy. Then, so, he went to America. America, too. Well, he sent people. Roosevelt said no, thank you. A big thank you, but no. So they didn't let them in either. Then they said to themselves, fine, we couldn't sell them to anyone. We'll push them out somewhere. They began exploring different directions. I'm sharing this story now so I can later connect it. And then this thing opened up. It's called the British Mandate. The League of Nations decided that finally, after 2,000 years since the Jews were expelled, it was time to create a state for them. And so there was this almost empty place which was historically called Israel. Well, God. That is, if you believe in God, then God said, this place is yours, Jews. He never took back his words, so in a sense, this place belongs to the Jews. If you believe in God, then it's Jewish. Let's send them all there from across the Reich. We want nothing, just for them to leave. Let them live there and do as they want, even take gold. There and, I don't know, diamonds, gold crowns in their teeth. That's it. But they'll leave the means of production behind, so to speak, and everything will be fine. Well, the British, who were given a mandate by the League of Nations to organize, what is a mandate anyway? This is on the territory of what used to be, well, Israel, and now it's today's Israel, plus Gaza, plus the West Bank, plus a part of Lebanon, plus something else. So, quite a lot. So, the real Israel, as it once was, to fence off this territory with some kind of iron, well, some kind of wire, yes, barbed wire, and to send all the Jews there, whoever wants to go there. And Hitler said, please, here we have, 800,000, a million or so, we will send all of you there. The British said they'd check first. They let in 30,000 and organized all the documents themselves. An uprising means Arabs committing pogroms. They said they couldn't do it because the Arabs opposed it. Hitler was stuck after promising benefits to the people, but there was nowhere to get them. So, nobody wants to take the Jews. Just killing them right in the middle of the streets wasn't really an option. So they decided, let's take them to places where they will live separately, and there, we'll kill them. Now, moving on to the situation in Ukraine, so to speak. I talked for so long so that you understand that this is not made up. These are documents. This is what Russia wanted, or what Putin originally wanted. Again, Putin here is a collective voice. They wanted Ukraine to be controllable. Moreover, kept under control fairly gently. Like, guys, change your constitution. Right now, you are a unitary state with the center in Kyiv. I do whatever I want. You will change it, just like America, right? There you have 15 or 18 different regions, call them states or whatever you want. It doesn't matter at all. Each state, like in America, will have its own rules, and there will be some common federal rules. And in the federal rules, it will be written that if 3 or 4 states or regions disagree with something, then the federal authorities can't do it. And the Russians knew for sure that out of those 18 or 20 so-called states, they would have control over 3, 4, maybe 5. I don't remember exactly how many. I think they counted on 4 so they'd have control and take part in all decisions. They didn't want to seize anything then. I mean, it's a takeover, of course, but honestly, your own oligarchs, well, Ukrainian oligarchs, have enslaved you much more. The Ukrainian people, more than what Putin offered. This was happening before Zelensky. I'm not even referring to Zelensky now. Yes. So, well, they made an agreement once, but it didn't seem to work out. They made another agreement, but again, it didn't seem to work out, you know. Then they started scaring people. The scare tactics began. We're going to attack and capture you now, or something like that. No, the West said, don't worry, we know for sure. We found our, so to speak, Major Petrov or maybe Schmidt dressed up as Masha and Popkin over there, is sleeping with Putin and knows exactly what he's planning. Again, Putin is gathering this both literally and figuratively. So that's how it all started. Then they began to put pressure. They started to put pressure with the first Minsk agreements. I apologize, of course, but Ukraine didn't fulfill them. You can say they were unfair, but why sign them in the first place, right? The second Minsk agreements were about a year later, if I'm not mistaken. So, well, guys, okay, we've played around enough. Let's do it. We want this, this, and this. Yes, okay, we'll do it. Everyone signed, but again, they didn't fulfill them. It became clear you can't sign anything with Ukraine. I'm not saying Russia is honest now. I want to show that Russia's goals changed because of Ukraine's behavior. And Ukraine, unfortunately, behaved the way those people who were funding it wanted. They were the ones pulling the strings. So at that moment when the first person came, I had neither sympathy nor antipathy. But this was the first person who said, I will try to play between the West and Russia. That is, I will not sharply side with the West, and I will not sharply side with Russia. Yes, I have a good, excellent relationship in Moscow. I have excellent relationships in other capitals as well. What happened? So no, said the United States of America, this won't work like that. We will allocate $5 billion to organize certain strikes there, certain people's movements, which you call Maidan, and $5 billion were spent to make them happen. Now all of Ukraine is sure that you came up with this yourselves. Okay, yes, but we have documents about how this was developed, who developed it, how it was introduced, what money was transferred to Ukraine, all of that. And it was slowly pushed into people's heads through the mass media because they need to eat. And that's why they took money, either directly or not directly, but through intermediaries they took money, maybe not money, maybe something else. The owner of the newspaper would suddenly get a concession for something in Brazil, right? And his newspaper would suddenly start writing what was needed for those $2 billion he got in Brazil. So they brought the situation to the point where a war was bound to break out. As they say, appetite grows as you eat. On the 21st day of the war, suddenly realizing that he had been punched in the face, seriously punched in the face, Putin said, okay, let's negotiate. Let's go back to the option. Minsk 2, right? And Arakamia flew out. They reached an agreement. He rushed back and said, great, guys, that's it. On the 23rd day of the war, we're ending it. There will be no more war, hooray. On that day, Boris Johnson arrives, who, on behalf of the President of the United States, Biden, I think, was here at that time, and the European Union demands that Ukraine not sign any agreements with Russia, but continue fighting. And he says, don't worry, we'll provide for you. By whom? Not only to stop Russia, but also to drive your army all the way to Moscow. And in this way, we'll overthrow this usurper and so on, right? And Peskov won't have a job. That is, to that island he already bought somewhere, an island in the Pacific. He flies there and talks to himself. Well, after they agreed on a ceasefire, and for the third time already, yes, but they haven't signed it yet. They were supposed to fly out to sign it, they agreed with the Russians, and suddenly they arrive. Just like Johnson said, and he says no. And so Zelensky, led by him, is not a very smart politician. I think he's a very smart person, as a person, in that sense. He's definitely talented, he can do a lot, he knows a lot. But as a politician, he's not smart. So he's a bad politician, period. He says that instead of focusing on the motherland, he thinks about ties with Ukraine, Europe, or maybe money. I don't know what he was thinking, right? Or maybe at that time he and Borisov were smoking together because, well, we all already know that he also smokes with Macron and with all sorts of other figures. So essentially, drug addicts are running countries, more or less. Actually, that's not clear. They're not drug addicts, and most don't have children. That's what's really surprising. And that's already incredibly strange because back in the day, you couldn't become the head of a state if you didn't have children, because that meant you weren't invested, as we say, in the future. You don't care about the future. You have no children, no grandchildren, but I care very much. My grandson is getting married, literally in a month. Yes, so I'll have great-grandchildren soon. I've already been happily told there will be many, many great-grandchildren. You see, I'm invested. But they aren't. So, what can I say? It's not good.
But the Ukrainian people hope that we can survive as a nation. At least we believe in it. What does our Kirilo Budanov say? He says that the American delegation should soon go to Russia and then come to Ukraine. The Americans are still in the process of negotiations, and we will look for ways to establish peace. Today, we had a guest on the air who said that in America, there is no talk about Witkoff or Kushner planning to go to Ukraine. What about you? What do you know about this?
There hasn't been any information about this. I generally keep an eye on it. So, again, anything is possible, because as they say, not everything gets reported. Well, things like this are usually reported if someone is planning to go somewhere. Gentlemen, well, nothing. Well, how many months or years can you keep believing that someone will come and sort things out? Well, that's enough. That's it. That's all. It's clear that the guy has his own people, his own ideas, and his own interests. And I have no idea what America wants from Ukraine today. I suspect that Trump wants to stop this whole thing because, well, judging by various actions, right? But I have absolutely no idea what others think about this. Because you can give an order, but, so to speak, those under you might not carry it out quite correctly or accurately. But that's not even what I'm talking about. You know, let's imagine that, yes, America wants there to be peace. But when faced with the fact that neither the Russian leadership nor the Ukrainian leadership wants peace, except entirely on their own terms, one side says, give us everything we want and disarm your army, like, you must not do it, you have no right, and so on. And the others say, until you leave our land, we won't agree. And of course, there are other ideas that are just nonsense, right? The main thing is, they've said this for years. So if this isn't resolved, if there isn't some kind of incentive or fear, or both an incentive and fear for one side and an incentive for the other side, then the leadership will just, I'm not talking about the people. Yeah, nobody tells the Russian people anything at all, and for the Ukrainian people, well, there's no opposition, I mean real opposition, so nobody explains to them what's going on either. Everything that gets through is either the state's official version or a slightly edited version supposedly from the front, supposedly from the opposition, but it's really just the state's position, and that's it. Everyone else gets destroyed. They've destroyed, exiled, shut down, basically harassed or warned people. If you tell the truth, your children will die. Yes, people have died in Russia. A very close friend of mine had his child thrown out of an 11th floor window just because he dared to speak some truth. They just threw the child out. He had 2 children and they called him and said, if you don't want the second one to be thrown from the same 11th floor or another, then shut up. So he kept quiet. Of course he did. It seems similar things are happening in Ukraine, though not exactly people being thrown from the 11th floor, but something else.
Honestly, it's very hard to speak the truth, and if someone says that the war needs to end and that we should agree to the current terms, it's because better terms might not come, or they might, but it's unlikely. They say that these people are collaborators and are working for Russian information operations, and that's it. That's the position from the authorities. There are no other explanations. But at the same time, they say that it's very beneficial for Russia to end the war now because, as they say, military expenses are no longer affordable for them. In order for them to be able to keep waging war, the Kremlin needs to get $100 per barrel for a whole year. That means they will sell oil at exactly those prices, and then they will have economic growth and they can afford to wage war. Right now, everything is pointing to the fact that it would be beneficial for them to end the war. What do you think?
I'll say that this again comes from the same source. You're being deceived. It's so that you think someone will come, in this case that Russia will run out of money and do something, and so fine, another 20, 40, or 60,000 of your guys will die, but at least we'll have better conditions for negotiations. You know, I really don't like it when people tell me things because I immediately start looking at the numbers. Right? Yes, Russia is in a difficult situation in some ways. Do they feel it in Moscow? Do they feel it in Moscow and St. Petersburg? No. No.
They don't feel the war in Ukraine at all. Why aren't they being mobilized, or why don't they feel the war?
Because it's happening somewhere over there. Well, even when something flies by, you know, once a missile landed a bit closer, yeah, boom, it fell. Well, they explained, guys, well, we missed it. Well, we missed one, we missed it. We won't miss anymore. Nothing else is flying. Nothing else is flying. So the people sitting, going to cafes, restaurants, saunas, and everything else in Moscow, who actually make all the decisions, And secondly, so to speak, Putin has a base in Petersburg, so in Leningrad, the former Leningrad, not St. Petersburg. They also make some decisions, yes, so you can put pressure on him there, and so on, put pressure, so to speak, pass on information and opinions. Things are good there. I talk to people there often, and they say, "What war? What are you talking about?" Well, yes, prices there have gone up by 10%, 15% because we get things through Turkey or through China, but in reality, life hasn't changed at all. So for those people, the people never decide anything. For those who supposedly make decisions but actually decide nothing. Nothing has changed, nothing has shifted, and nothing will change in the near future. And so
they don't really feel the war. People are dying, but the war doesn't feel that intense. Although these analysts say that when they talked about the deadline that the war should end in early June in Ukraine, this was discussed back in Anchorage when Trump and Putin met. And these analysts were counting on a peace agreement being formed and signed by both sides. So that was what they were counting on. But for some reason, things didn't go as planned, and no one is saying why. And it seems like these hardships are really tough for the Russian budget. Maybe not for the people, but it's hard on the budget. It leaves its mark on GDP, and it has a very negative impact on the economy. You don't see or hear this trend.
I don't understand anything, to be honest. Look, a barrel of oil is the main source of income, oil and gas, right, for Russia. A barrel of oil costs $65. Since the moment America got involved in the Strait of Hormuz and started, so to speak, the story in Lebanon, it's been, more than 2 months, right? And it shot up to over 100 plus. In other words, if Russia used to get, after all expenses, including military expenses, about $5 per barrel, now they get $55 per barrel. So the expenses stayed the same, but the income increased, right?
So there are fewer sanctions now, if I understand correctly. There are fewer sanctions and more opportunities to trade.
Fewer sanctions? Oh, well, I mean that they were allowed to trade. Well, yes, no, not fewer sanctions, but specifically what they used to do secretly, now they can do openly. And before, they used to lose about $15 to $20 per barrel because they had to bypass those sanctions. Now they don't lose that, and you're absolutely right. Yes, that's just the math. So, 50 is. Net 5 is regular and plus another 15, yes, $70 per barrel. Now instead of 5, they get this amount. Well, in what sense do they have enough money? Yes, I did a big show about this. There I talked for 35 minutes about how Russia's situation is bad, so to speak, how their economic situation has gotten worse. Of course, their economic situation is bad, yes. But they do have money for the war. Until things get truly bad in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Nothing will change because no one cares, so to speak. Ever since Prigozhin marched on Moscow, people in Moscow realized that they need to keep the outlying regions under a tight grip. Yes. Well, that's it, because, so to speak, they let them go, and yes, they don't care about them. And there you have it, so to speak, why he went. I understand. Why he stopped, I don't know, but they did something and stopped him. Well, but it doesn't matter. It showed that the outskirts are really dissatisfied. So we'll make it so that heads will roll. Well, like in Iran, yes, people came out dissatisfied. 35 to 42,000 people were just shot point blank during the demonstrations, and that's it. It was all over. Russia is doing exactly the same thing, it's just not as visible. So that's why the talk about Russia, what's the point of this conversation? It's your own government spreading this to convince its people that we will outlast them. Well, you won't outlast us. Your so-called outlasting means 20,000 people, at least 20,000 young people every month. 20,000 young people every month. Well, what can I say to you? So to speak, yes. If someone has a very negative attitude toward Ukraine, they say, great, the longer you fight, the fewer of you will be left. Those who have a good attitude toward Ukraine say, guys, are you crazy or what? There will be no one left of you. Your culture will be gone. Because when you have no young people left, you'll be taken with bare hands.
And they say that Russia's getting weaker, that it can't fight as effectively as it used to. Right now on the battlefield, the Ukrainian army has, an advantage over the Russians. They're winning, but they're capturing less land than before. And this month, they've captured the lowest amount of land since the beginning of 2023. And against this background, we need to understand our authorities are saying that there is a prospect of ending the war by November. So for some reason, we need to wait until November. All of this is happening right now, but we have to wait until November and then sit down at the negotiating table before winter. Why are they pushing everything toward November?
What do you think? Because the elections in the United States of America are in November. Because your leadership, your Ukrainian leadership, they are tied to finances, to crimes. What's even more important, they're, so to speak, bound by blood and tied into criminal schemes with the Democratic Party, not the party itself, but with the leaders of the Democratic Party of the United States of America. And when Trump came to power, it was a nightmare because they started hiding, burning, removing, and so on, all the documents and all the evidence. And if the Democrats win back the House of Representatives, and in our case, out of almost 50, no, in the last 50 years, there have been 25 elections. Every 2 years, there are elections to Congress. Well, not the entire Congress is reelected, but, so to speak, partially. Every 4 years, it's a full reelection, but otherwise, it's about half. So, here's the thing. Out of these 25 elections, in 23 cases, the president's party that was just elected lost 2 years later. People would backtrack saying, he's doing something I don't like. Let's elect others to keep him in check. Only twice in this entire history did it happen otherwise, and there were completely objective reasons why. For example, under George W. Bush, when the Twin Towers were destroyed, the people united and said, we don't want to change any government. We want to strike Afghanistan with an iron fist. No one expected this jerk to send troops. Everyone assumed he'd just fly over and bomb them. That's it. Well, it doesn't matter. So I was also like, yes, we need to do it and so on, but when I opened my mouth, when I realized that we wanted to occupy Afghanistan, for 3,000 years, everyone has tried and failed to conquer Afghanistan, yet we still tried. Well, all right. So besides those 2 times, there was also a story with Clinton, with Monica Lewinsky, and all sorts of funny things like that, so to speak, which is why people went out and voted, because they decided that our little Clinton was being mistreated, so they went and voted for him. I'm completely serious. That's exactly what they said. Our Clinton is being mistreated, our sweetheart, our handsome guy. That's it. So the rest are all 23. So they hope that it will be exactly the same as it always was, basically, all the time, always, almost always. And that the Democrats will get power back. And if the Democrats get power back, then basically the president is left without any power. Well, I mean, he still has some power, maybe, but not real power. That is, he can't squeeze money out for anything. He will have to end the war in Iran. If it happens, I hope it will be over by then, but if it continues, he will have to leave. Just like they did with Vietnam. They forced them to leave for no reason. For no reason. Nobody was losing anything to the Soviet Union. They just said funding would stop. So if that's the case, you have to leave. That means it was because the Democrats were fighting Nixon. Well, that's when they did it. Now it means, well, the same thing. The same thing could happen here. That's why they say we need to wait until November. How much time do we have? We don't have much left. So there's June, July, August, September, October. Well, and there are only 6 months left, multiplied by 20,000. In total, about 120,000 young Ukrainians will be removed. But, well, at least the Democratic Party might win because of this. So, in my opinion, it's a very clear calculation. I'm not, yes.
It will win. It will simply give money to the current Ukrainian authorities. And it won't ask where they're spending it. It won't demand an audit. Well, we'll just keep living in war and people will keep seeing it. And maybe,
even after that, when they finally catch their breath, so to speak, and come to an agreement, somehow, a little deal between themselves, so to speak, between Putin's oligarchs and American oligarchs, and Ukrainian ones too, including them. Well, now, so to speak, Zelensky is also an oligarch, so you can count him in too.
But they'll keep him in power in that kind of situation?
I don't think so, because he made a lot of mistakes. But they'll let him go with honor. Nothing will happen to him. He will, so to speak, give speeches around the world, everywhere, and make good money. They won't have to pay for all sorts of things, just like Clinton. He traveled around the world, went to Moscow, and got $500,000 for half an hour. For what? Well, he had to be paid because his wife handed over uranium to Russia, well, through the Canadian company. Well, they had to pay somehow, so they did. They gave him $500,000 almost in cash, yes. And another $20 million was donated to their foundation, but personally he got $500,000. So, well, again, everything is in the correspondence of those guys who were involved in this, yes. That's why no one is being prosecuted, because how can we prosecute a Russian citizen, right? Why come to us?
Зачем к нам приезжают мигранты? That's the question. Because Ukrainians are asking, why do we need them? If we need people for the front, then we need them. There are people who are ready to go to the front. The Ukrainian authorities say that they are ready to pay a salary of $7,000. For $7,000, maybe someone will go fight. And maybe some Ukrainians will stay and fight or go to war for that kind of money. That's already up to those people. But they bring people to us from India. From Bangladesh, they say that they should improve the infrastructure. Roads and other necessary work, these things need to be done. On whose initiative are they coming to us? Well, maybe Soros and the globalists came up with this. If so, why? Or is it the initiative of our authorities, or are they just acting without any initiative, just doing whatever, so to speak?
You know, of course, I don't know for sure who's doing this, but let's look at the European Union. The European Union is bringing in, as they say, a workforce that actually doesn't want to work. Neither they themselves, nor their children, nor their grandchildren want to work or plan to. They believe that these are mostly people with an Islamic background. And they believe that it's Allah. Allah brought them here so that the foolish Europeans would feed them. They don't see why they should work, since Allah didn't bring them here for that. So to go to war for that kind of money, well, maybe someone from Africa would go. I just don't really understand. Is Ukraine really ready to fight with mercenaries and destroy its own cities? Because the cities will be destroyed more and more, the infrastructure will be destroyed, and people will die, women, children, anyone. For what? Just to keep the war going? But if there are enough of them, like in London today, it won't even be called London anymore, they call it Landiston, right? It's a joke. There are more mosques in London. Once again, there are more mosques in London than in Saudi Arabia. There are more mosques in London than in Saudi Arabia. You can check it. I hope I'm giving you the right numbers. Here you go.
I think, can that really be true? Probably.
Well, of course it can be, because in London, their mosques are used not only for prayers, but also to properly enlighten people. In order to replace London laws, that is, European laws, with Sharia, to recruit people, to do many things, so to speak. It's not a church anymore, so to speak. It's not just a place for prayer. It's a place where a lot of things happen. Now, for them, every mosque is what we in America call a community center. That is, a community center that has a whole range of functions that it performs for the group of people it serves, whether geographically or otherwise. For example, in London and all over Europe, they built a huge number of these community centers, and they bought rather large plots of land, fenced them off so much that it was impossible to get in. They did and still do many things there we don't know about, and police have no right to enter. For a number of reasons, let's say, well, in London the mayor is an Islamist, he's a Muslim himself, he's an Islamist, and he forbids the police from entering mosque grounds at all. Everything that happens in the mosques is under mosque jurisdiction, so basically two sets of laws exist in parallel. In the great country that brought us the charter and so on, yes, that's practically democracy. Now, I don't really like modern democracy, but at least it was a big improvement over what was before. So why are these people being brought to you? First of all, because there's some kind of deal at the top. I don't know if someone personally, like Zelensky or someone else, is getting something for this. Or maybe something is being done so that, like, if you let them go, we'll do something for you. Why does Europe need this? They have some kind of... Well, why did the Germans do this? They were, let's say, trying to score points. Well, Merkel, for example, right? She was trying to pack the country with a huge number of potential voters, but these people don't understand anything about democracy. They don't understand the principles of capitalism and so on and so on. In other words, she was trying to turn all of Germany into the GDR using the votes of these people. And besides, as Harm Marx said, to fight the capitalists, you have to drain the blood from their veins. And what is blood in capitalism? It's money. So when a person has a lot of money, they can, after finishing work on Friday, spend Saturday and Sunday thinking about something, reading something, calling for something, or disagreeing with something. But if every second of his time he is thinking about how to survive, then he won't interfere with the bosses carrying out whatever policy they want. And this is the main idea, to destroy the middle class. This is the idea, to destroy the middle class. They are doing this both in America and in Europe, and now, as you told me, in your country too. This is done in such a way to make it clearer by burdening the population with a huge number of expenses that they cannot handle themselves without losing money. Thank you.
So does our government get any privileges for this? Well, for example, some money, some better conditions. It's not just like, for instance, the European Union tells Zelensky to take in migrants and he just says, okay, whatever you say. They probably offer him something in return that suits him, and that's why they come to us.
A sweetener, yes, some kind of sweetener exists. So, yes, there's no stick. Well, the stick is like, if you don't do what we want, that's not said. That's also implied, right? Like, then we won't do what you want either. Yeah, that's the stick. And the carrot is some kind of sweetener, so to speak. Personally, or in Ukraine, that's quite possible. Yes, because to a large extent, the fate of Ukraine from Zelensky's point of view is connected with his. If Ukraine is captured, he may have to flee, be executed, or face another punishment, like being put in a cage. So, where his fate coincides with the fate of Ukraine, he does everything necessary, so to speak, to save his own skin along with Ukraine, but where it diverges, it diverges.
And you asked why should Ukrainians accept refugees who are ready to go fight just to avoid dying themselves, especially when the infrastructure is collapsing? People understand this and people want to stop the war, but they don't have enough influence over the authorities. And that's why when it comes to saving their own lives or their property, the family decides what to do. They even decide to sell their apartment, pay money at the borders, and send their son or husband, take them abroad. That's why people are willing, probably would agree to these conditions in order to save the lives of their loved ones, I guess. But the authorities are not considering this option. Again, the authorities aren't saying Colombians will come here and fight while you build roads, bring bread, food, or medicine to pharmacies. Our men come home and they go to the front. That's the question. The authorities aren't raising it. Why? If Europe gives us money, we could use that money if the decision is made to fight with mercenaries.
You know, honestly, this is the first time I've heard from you about such amounts like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 and so on. I assume that's per month, right? Because who would go to fight for that amount for a whole year? I think the situation is as follows. I imagine myself living in Ukraine, right? And I love Ukraine. And I have children there who are about to be taken into the army. And I ask myself, do I love Ukraine enough to send my children to die so that Ukraine doesn't give up a single meter of land? And I say to myself, no, it's not enough. It's not enough. I would walk, I would, so to speak, bribe, I would break through, I would do anything to get those children out of there. Now, so the second option, I live in Israel. And it's the same situation. And here I have a different approach, and I wonder why. By different, I mean I send my kids and go myself if possible, right? Like I already did, by the way. So that's the kind of difference I have in my head. I could say, oh, you love Israel, you don't love Ukraine, that's why, right? I think I feel this way because I know that if Israel is ever taken over, if it's captured by any Arabs who come in, the same thing will happen as before. Like what Hamas did on the 7th in the kibbutzim and so on when they broke through, right? They found 2,300 people there, I think 2,300 if I'm not mistaken, right? They killed 2,000 of them, raped, burned them in ovens, threw children, killed them there, cut open their stomachs, and about 200 people there, I can't remember the exact number right now, were taken captive and abused. Half were killed, half were raped again, beaten, not fed, and so on. The rest were returned now because, well, they had to be returned, right? I know for sure that the same thing will happen all over the territory of Israel. The slogan "From the river to the sea" means that between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there will not be a single Jew left. That's, so to speak, just their slogan. From the river to the sea, to cleanse all the land of, filthy, lousy, disgusting Jews. That includes my relatives, and me too. So I think that if that's the situation, then I let the children go. But the situation in Ukraine is different. Most likely, I would either take the children out of there or hide.
Yes, either hide or take them out. That's how the situation is. Why do you say you haven't heard such amounts from anyone? Well, you've heard it from me now because this is reform. This is the reform our government is proposing. And yesterday they started talking about it. Sulumya Bubrovskaya, she mentioned that they would pay such amounts. This happened against the backdrop of the European Union giving us money. At the end of June, there will be the first tranche if we meet the conditions. It's still unclear. The reforms are ready, but we need money. Give us whatever you can. We tell the Americans, give us licenses for Patriot. We need Patriots. If you won't give them to us, then at least give us the licenses. To the Europeans, we say, give us money because we need money. That's the position of Ukrainians.
I have a wonderful story. So somewhere around 1992, of course, last century, not the one before that. So there were the mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Alexandrovich Sobchak, your humble servant, and the rector of Leningrad University. We're sitting in a restaurant on some rooftop and we're talking about some possible projects, business, and something else, more things. I had quite extensive connections in America, so I could reach all the financiers they were interested in. Well, they talked to me about it. So, and Sobchak says, I don't remember the name, to the rector. Listen, he says, you told me about this timber project. Why don't you involve Leon and the people behind him? He says, yes, by the way, that's a great idea. I have a deputy there or something. We have some kind of cooperative. It doesn't matter what it was, a small business. Could we give him your phone number? I say, of course, yes. The next day, Seryozha calls me and says, hello, I'm a candidate of mathematical sciences, and I'm the vice rector for certain issues. Can we meet? We can meet. So, we meet. He tells me everything. I'll be quick, not for long. And he tells me about a wonderful project that we need about $300,000. With this, we go and buy timber. This timber, by the way, cannot be exported. But if you trim it on one side, it's called a pole, and that's why it can be exported, and we will export poles to Switzerland. And then he shows me a contract with a Swiss company. This company pays us a set amount which we use for this purpose. Here's the contract again. Everything is planned, and from these 300,000, we get $1 million. So we give back the 300,000. There are 700 left to export. We split it in half, so that's 350 each. That means you have a 100% profit. I say, can this be repeated as many times as we want? I say, then why give it all away? Maybe it makes sense to reinvest it? Yes, that's what we thought too. Simple. All right, that's it. Let's go. I call one of my partners in Los Angeles. I tell him the whole story. He says, Leon, well, it sounds really great. The only thing is, let's check this on our end. I say, how? He says, well, ask what the minimum amount needed is to run this once and see how it works. He says, well, 300,000, of course, I can give. But still, well, I call Seryozha. I say, Seryozha, candidate of mathematical sciences, vice rector. I say, and the minimum? He also says to me, yes, 45,000. I say, what is 45,000? He says, now you can buy a whole rail car of beer in France. Sell it. And here, he says, we have the right to sell it without duty. And, well, the university got it there for some of their own needs. So we transport it without duty. We sell it straight off the rail car. We get cash, so to speak, 300,000. That's what we need. We bring it, we do it, this, that, everything. Basically, that's all. I call again. I say, let's do it. We're buying. I personally am buying a rail car of Kronenberg beer. $45,000. I send it there then.
Значит, туда?
They receive it, clear it through customs. They say thank you and disappear.
And that's it.
I call. No, that's the end, the most important part. I call Seryozha. I say, Seryozha. He picks up the phone but then gets away from me and doesn't call. I ask, Seryozha, what's going on? He says, no, everything is fine. Everything is very good. We sold everything. We really got a lot of money. Yes. I say, well, he says, you see, something happened. He says, I'll be honest with you. He says, you're one of us, Soviet. There, I didn't tell anyone else. I'll tell you. He says, some old lady showed up and we couldn't steal from them or anything. He used a different word. There you go. I say, in what sense? He says, well, the money appeared. He says. And the guy said, where are you investing them? Let's take them right away. We took them.
This is your answer. Why? Why don't you give us the license money for Patriot?
No, I'll be honest with you. We got this money from the university, meaning they took it, and then the university gave us this money. All the contracts were there with the Americans. In this court, it's tough. Yes, we told them, guys, there will be an international court. Not just because we need the 45,000 so much, but because it's upsetting. So they gave it back to us, transferred everything, gave it all back. The university transferred it, the rector called, apologized, and Sobchak called, apologized, so everything is fine. Then, well, the old ladies got organized, but the guys said, how could we let it slip through our fingers? What?
And do you think that if this is organized by our authorities, it will be the same?
I think it's the same in Ukraine. They send money to Ukraine, right? And they say, let's pretend we hired 1,000 Africans, but we'll actually hire 2 and show them on TV saying, look, 1,000. By the way, I also have a story about that. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was walking down the street in Leningrad where I lived, and as I was approaching my house, suddenly someone ran up to me. Actually, I was probably older, maybe 10. I already had my pioneer tie. Some woman runs up to me and says, boy, do you have 10 minutes? I said, yes, I do. She says, can you do me a favor? I need to take a picture of you. I say, yes, of course I'm a pioneer, right? Yeah. She physically takes me by the hand, leads me across the street, and there is the House of Journalists in Leningrad. She sits me down in a chair. Some photographers appear right away. They take pictures of me, giving me an accordion to hold. So they sit me down, give me an accordion, and I'm sitting there, I'm a pioneer, right? Yeah, they tell me, smile, this and that, I get photographed, and that's it. That's basically where it all ends. 10 years go by. I'm about 20, no, I think 17, right? I'm on the dance floor. I walk up to a girl and ask her to dance, and she says, I know you from somewhere. I say, we've never met, I think, right? She says, no, definitely. Wait a second. And the girl had a good face, but I couldn't recognize her back then. She says, you're hanging in the House of Journalists right in the center, she says, for about 10 years now, she says. As a little girl, my mom took me there often, which is why I remember I walked past your portrait every day. And it says there under it, you with the accordion, and it says, in our accordion club, there are 20 people. Well, I apologize for standing today. Yes, I understand.
This is something similar to what will happen.
In our regiment, there are 1,427 Africans, so if you multiply 1,427 by $6,000, you'll get the amount that ended up somewhere else.
That's why Americans don't want to give us money or patriots or licenses, nothing. And I suspect they don't even want to deal with Ukrainians.
Again, it's not exactly like that, of course, but honestly, naturally, they've just gone wild. That's why they're waiting in Ukraine, hoping the government will change and thieves will return to power so everything will be fine. Because a thief will steal from another thief, and that's actually very fair if it happens that way. Let's exploit the exploiters. Let's take from those who take like it was back then. It was very beautiful in the Soviet Union. What's that? That's how it is. Yeah.
Well, let's hope that thieves don't come, but there's less and less hope. Every time I go on air, I wonder who might come to power here. And when I hear what people say, I have less and less hope. Really, that someone will come who will take care, so to speak, of the Ukrainian people.
I really hope so. Really, and I started to have, so to speak, some bright glimpses, hopes, that this time there won't be a transfer of power in the lower house of Congress, the House of Representatives. That's what we call it here, right? From Republicans to Democrats. That the Republicans will stay, Maybe again with a very small margin, but still the Republicans will stay, which at the very least. Ideally, we should have a margin of 10 or 15, but if someone gets sick, someone leaves, or something else happens, at least you can be sure about this. But I think it will stay. I hope the House of Representatives will remain with the Republicans, so Trump will at least be able to continue pursuing his goal. And so in November he will have it, and in December I would say yes, significantly more. So this hope it will be gone by then, and it will really hit Zelensky and those with him over the head. I don't know exactly who those with him are, but I think you can just name the entire lineup of his previous and current cabinet. I apologize, I'm not entirely sure that Budanov is better than Shmudanov. That's it. Although there is no evidence except that we had a lot of rumors going around that Budanov was sending tanks to Africa. I don't know where he was getting them from. Again, I can't talk.
No, probably not.
I can't guarantee that, but all the time when he was still in intelligence, there were always talks that Budanov was the one who sent tanks to Africa. Some kind of secret. Okay.
That's why there's hope. There's hope in Trump, thank you.
Yes, there's hope for Trump that he'll crack down hard, and I think that's what they're doing. They're trying to persuade you, meaning the leadership of Ukraine, are trying to persuade you, the Ukrainian people, that just a little more and everything will be fine. Their enthusiasm will run out in November, in the month of November, if the Republicans come to power. Well, and then they will realize that they still have 2 years, not 3 or 4 months. And still they will start thinking that maybe, so they don't get completely hanged when all this is over, let's at least try to negotiate and make peace. And then we will have at least one of the two sides that wants to bring the matter to a peaceful agreement. Without Russia completely leaving and so on from all Ukrainian territories, it won't leave on its own.
Thank you for the conversation. We encourage viewers to subscribe to both channels. Thanks for joining us today, for your likes, comments, and everything. See you next time.
Goodbye, Tanya. Editor.